Hey everybody, this is Casey from Undercover Fallout, and tonight's episode is going to be with the CJNG cartel and all the things we know about them and all the things that Notebook LM could dig up on them. So enjoy the show.
All right, let's just jump right into it. We're going to be talking about one of the most powerful, most sophisticated, and frankly, one of the most brutally violent criminal organizations on the entire planet, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG. In this explainer, we're going to break down how they rose to power, the global empire they built, and the big question, what happens when you finally cut the head off a serpent like this?
So to really get a grip on the CJNG, you have to follow the money. Let's start with this number, $4.6 billion. That's the estimated cash they pull in every single year from just one of their products, crystal meth. Think about that for a second. That kind of money doesn't just buy fancy cars. It fuels an army. It corrupts governments. It builds an entire empire.
And make no mistake, an empire is exactly what they've built. This isn't just my opinion. The Mexican government itself has stated that the CJNG is, without a doubt, the most dangerous criminal organization in the country and the most powerful drug cartel operating today. Period. This right here, this really gets to the core of what makes them different. It's not just about selling drugs. The CJNG strategy is like a three-pronged attack. First, you have just extreme, shocking violence. Then you have their paramilitary tactics. They operate like a special forces unit. And then there's the modern twist, incredibly sophisticated propaganda. They use social media like a weapon to terrorize rivals and try to shape what the public thinks.
And their tactics became so brazen, so over the top, that other countries had to sit up and take notice. This is a huge deal. In February 2025, the United States officially labeled the CJNG a terrorist organization. That tells you everything you need to know. They're not just seen as criminals anymore. They're viewed as a genuine threat to national security.
So the big question is, where did this absolute monster come from? How did they get so big so fast? Well, to understand that, we've got to rewind a bit. Their story begins in the chaos left behind when an older cartel started to crumble, and they emerged from the ashes with a chillingly effective brand. And when I say it happened fast, I mean lightning fast. Just look at this timeline. In 2009, they're just a small crew splintering off from the old Millennial Cartel. A year later, by 2010, they're already deep in a full-blown bloody turf war. And by 2011, they make their grand entrance on the national stage with a series of horrifying massacres that put everybody on notice.
And this is where that whole propaganda machine comes into play. This was one of their first public messages, and it is just wild. They called themselves the Mata Zetas, which means Zeta killers. And get this, they claimed they were vigilantes fighting against kidnapping and extortion to create a cleaner Mexico. It's just chilling, the hypocrisy of saying that while committing unimaginable acts of violence.
100. Let that sink in. That's how many people were killed in the state of Veracruz in the span of just 18 days back in 2011. This wasn't just a turf war. No way. This was a statement. This was a brutal, bloody announcement that a new and far more ruthless power had just arrived. But you know, that whole campaign of terror, in a way, it was just their twisted form of marketing. Because behind all the violence, they were quietly building something much bigger. A sophisticated, multinational business operation that would turn them into a global powerhouse. What's really incredible here is their business model. They operate less like a traditional cartel and more like a criminal corporation. Just look at their portfolio. It's so diversified. Of course, you've got drug trafficking, but they're also into fuel theft. Literally tapping into state-owned pipelines, extortion, weapons trafficking, human trafficking, and even high-tech cybercrime. This isn't a gang. It's an illicit conglomerate.
And while they have their hands in a lot of different pots, let's be real. Drugs are still the main cash cows. Just look at these figures. The cocaine trade alone is estimated to bring in a staggering $8 billion a year. That absolutely dwarfs their meth profits, which, as we saw, are already massive. The numbers are they're almost hard to wrap your head around.
So you might be asking yourself, how on earth do they move that much product? The answer is a seriously complex global supply chain. They have established contacts for sourcing, for shipping, for distribution all across the Americas, all through Asia, and even in Australia. This makes them a true transnational criminal enterprise. But when you build an empire that big, that fast, you're going to make enemies. A lot of them. The history of the CJNG is basically a history of constant, brutal conflict. They've been fighting a two-front war,
one against all their external rivals, and another against fractures and traitors within their own ranks.
And that internal war, it got personal. The most significant one was with the Nueva Plaza cartel. Now, this wasn't a fight with some strangers. This was a straight-up civil war. Two of the co-founders of the CJNG, guys known as L85 and El Cholo, broke away. They turned former allies into deadly enemies, all fighting for control of the organization's birthplace, Guadalajara.
This table here gives you a sense of the sheer chaos they're dealing with. Look at how many different enemies they're fighting, all at the same time. You've got your primary global rivals like the Sinaloa Cartel. Then you have powerful regional rivals like the Knights Templar. And then you have this smaller but just as violent local gangs that they're battling street by street. It is a perpetual state of war on all fronts.
So all of that brings us to now, to the single most critical moment in the cartel's entire history. For years, the CJNG was defined by one man, its founder and undisputed leader, El Mencho. But a very recent event has thrown absolutely everything into chaos. And then, it finally happened. The untouchable kingpin was gone. On February 22, 2026, El Mencho was killed by the Mexican military. This one single event sent a massive shockwave, not just through the cartel, but across the entire landscape of organized crime in Mexico.
So, what happens when the guy at the top is suddenly gone? Well, you get what's called a power vacuum. It's a pretty simple idea. When a leader who has absolute authority is suddenly removed, it leaves this huge, empty void. And that void is almost always filled with violence and instability.
And these are the men who are now scrambling to fill that void. See, El Mencho's son, the guy who was supposed to take over, is sitting in a U.S. prison, so there's no clear line of succession. Instead, you've got these powerful regional commanders, guys like El Doble R and El Jardinero, all with their own armies, their own ambitions, and they're all vying for the throne.
And this leads us to the terrifying billion-dollar question that security analysts and, frankly, millions of ordinary citizens across Mexico are asking themselves right now. Does the removal of the kingpin cause this entire criminal empire to shatter into warring factions, making the country even more violent? Or does one of those ambitious commanders manage to consolidate power and create a new, maybe even more ruthless version of the CJNG? The future is totally uncertain and dangerously volatile.